Well, Shy and I are back, and the turnaround time on this part is my fault, actually. Life picked up the pace again, and I'm getting back into the swing of things still. It's hard to find a balance with a 5-year-old. Last time we covered several aspects of the Imperium military, including ships, guardsmen, personal weaponry, culture, and communication. This time we finished the evaluation of the Imperium and what they bring to the table.
The best the Imperium of Man has to throw at their greatest foes is, without a doubt, the Space Marine, specifically the Primaris Marine, Space Marines 2.0. An upgrade from the original Space Marine, Primaris Marines are more stable, stronger, more effective, heal faster, and are allegedly immune to the power of Chaos Corruption. More importantly, a standard Space Marine can be upgraded into a Primaris Marine, making sure that the Old Guard are never truly obsolete. Chosen as children for their extremely fit conditions and willpower, Space Marines are 7.5 feet tall and, in this scenario, about 10 times stronger than a human at peak performance! It's said that one fully armed and armored Space Marine is worth 100 guardsmen and, depending on the fluff, far more. For the sake of a good proper breakdown, we'll assume the average guardsman can easily heft and carry around 100 pounds for the sake of impromptu battlefield scrambling. Grab your shit, get it out fast. A Space Marine, therefore, would be able to easily heft another Space Marine out of the field with minimal effort, if any. That's 1,000 pounds easy hefting by a naked Space Marine.
Their main guns, called bolters, are, like the laser guns, a war crime just waiting for a place. They shoot a 75 caliber round, something that's around the profile of a 40mm high explosive shell in a rapid fire kind of way. We have something like that in modern day. It's called the Mark 19 grenade launcher. It's a machine gun that shoots grenades. Whatever you decide needs to disappear on the battlefield, with this thing, it's getting misted. My people, the U.S. Marines, have one with us wherever we deploy, with a trigger-happy Lance Corporal that's manning it and is just itching to shoot it. It is both terrifying to shoot and will give you the biggest hard-on when you do.
But these depleted uranium-tipped high-explosive monster shells don't work like normal rounds. Each bolter round is a specially constructed gyrojet that propels itself and keeps on target after it leaves the barrel, as determined by targeting information fed to the round by the Marine power armor before it's ever shot. While they can't shoot around big corners or anything, these rounds absolutely will turn enough to hit a fast-moving target, and when they hit that target, they'll bore at high speed through its armor and blow it up from the inside out, leaving the enemy as good as body temperature strawberry jam, no matter how tough the can they're hiding in happens to be. But let's say that it is tough enough. No worries, there are heavy bolters with adamantium-tipped rounds to take care of that.
Now for every ground pounder's wet dream. Power armor. Not only are Space Marines specifically made through augmentation to be far faster, stronger, and more resilient than your everyday human, they are equipped with armor that increases their stats considerably. For this matchup, it's going to be by a solid order of magnitude, or 10 times their base.
That's right, Adam. Made of ceramite, and sometimes adamantium, with the benefit of the black carapace allowing them to literally feel through the armor, power armor brings the average Space Marine, in this scenario, up to 100 times the strength of an average guardsman. Assuming a guardsman can carry 100 pounds, and a Space Marine can then carry 1,000 pounds with ease, these heinous sets of big boy mechanized armor can let a Primaris Marine lift 5 straight up tons with no problem. This matches up with the fluff earlier that an armed and armored Space Marine is worth 100 guardsmen. There you go, Buttermilk Bob, right out of the setting's mouth. They can turn most basic lasgun fire and basic kinetic rounds easily, and are essentially proof against anything underneath the level of a bolter in the 40k setting, capable of operating in a vacuum and able to provide days or even weeks of life support conditions for the Marine in question. Space Marine power armor has all sorts of sensor systems, magnetic boots, jump jets, a nuclear power plant in the backpack, and every nerd's dream, a heads-up display.
However, the key thing about Space Marines is that any one chapter is only allowed to have up to 1,000 of them. They are not considered a standing army. They are shock troopers meant to assault and control heavily armed and armored positions fast and hard. The Space Marines are hard to produce and time-consuming to train as well. Once their numbers take a hit, it takes years to replenish the ranks. This is a problem. See, you can't just turn anyone into a Space Marine. The process starts in pre-teen children, and many don't survive the modification process. Even having potentially billions of kids to choose from, you're still looking at a decade, at least, to train a replacement.
What's more, the process that makes you into a Space Marine is based off of kickstarting puberty and supercharging the testosterone production process. Suitably, only male-bodied children can be Space Marines, cutting in half the potential population to choose from. Don't worry, though. There are functionally all-female groups too. And no, we're not talking about the Sisters of Battle, though our heart lies with Ephrael Stern every day. We're obviously talking about the Calidus Assassins, the super awesome blank-faced shape-changing murder babes. Hashtag Calidus Assassin, best assassin. And for those of you like, oh no, men can totally be Calidus Assassins too. Shut up! No, they can't. Go join the Vindicare if you want to be a man-assassin, you pathetic loser. Anywho, for this particular scenario, we're going to say that all 1,000 chapters are full up, even though that's incredibly unrealistic, almost to the point of impossibility. We're also going to say that there are 2 million extra Primaris Marines just lying around in the background in cold sleep waiting for Belisarius' call to get them out. You know, that seems reasonable. That seems like something you'd do. 3 million Primaris Marines in total. Them's the numbers the Imperium is working with.
So the Space Marines have some strange and useful augmentations that they can get. Some badass, and some that just straight should not work. But hell, we'll roll with it. Some of the more useful ones are the ability to see in darkness, filter out toxic substances from the air with a third lung, to go into a healing coma, have a second heart, and they can eat pretty much anything. Some of the more interesting ones are that they can spit acid and gain the memories of slain enemies from drinking the blood of their slaughtered foes. I have no idea how that last one works, but it's useful nonetheless. While not all chapters had access to some of these augmentations, allegedly Primus Marines have a far more stable gene seed that conserves these abilities, so the modern Marines in this matchup will have access to all such abilities. The Imperium seems to take a Zap Brannigan approach to warfare, throwing bodies at a problem until it just stops being a problem.
Well, when 10 to 25% of your populated worlds house hundreds of billions to dozens of trillions of people apiece, you can afford to throw away regiment after regiment until your enemy wears to dust. It totally works. That being said, it's not all charging face first into destruction. That's the cultural doctrine of the Imperium, sure, but plenty of generals are allowed to be innovative enough when it comes to moving around millions on the map. Because of this moment-to-moment in the field, command is pretty fast and loose with what's allowed and what isn't. While obviously breaking and running is completely taboo, plenty of Imperial Guard regiments have a well-ingrained concept of advancing to the rear while laying down suppressive fire, and all manner of Space Marine chapters are capable of extremely innovative and high-level maneuvers. The present Lord Protector of the Imperium, the Primarch Robute Gilliman, is even said to have written a tome containing all possible battlefield maneuvers that could ever exist. While this is almost certainly not the case, it does serve as a primary example that tactics and strategy on the field matter quite a bit to their culture, and they aren't against using battlefield innovation in the general sense.
To their credit, the Imperium, once they have troops on the ground, have an impressive array of combat elements that are not unlike our modern military ground forces. Artillery assets are great for laying down indirect fire, which can not only be used to target specific enemy forces from considerable distance, but can be used to control enemy movement by denying access to routes for travel, flanking positions, and assets that they want to take. You can also use these munitions to walk the enemy towards you in a way that you want them to meet you on the battlefield.
To say nothing of the spectacular dedicated bombardments that have been historically laid out in setting to gradually overload the void shields of hive cities and fortress citadels, all for the sake of making an opening for a gigantic charge once the generators finally overload.
Tanks can accomplish a variety of tasks today, from anti-armor with depleted uranium rounds to a shotgun-like blast for anti-personnel needs, and their high mobility makes them capable of maneuvering around the battlefield largely uncontested. The backbone of this whole thing, however, is the infantry, which consists of both regular people and Space Marines. Humans are incredibly tenacious when we need to be, and there is no surgical strike that will beat a fire team of people on the ground.
As we have said to many in the past, you can have all manner of fancy tools, airships, and naval vessels, but at the end of the day, you gotta have, quote, boots on the ground, unquote, and that is where the Imperium specializes. It's important also to remember that certain planets have certain cultures of their own in the millions of worlds-strong Imperium of Man, and each might put out a different standard of soldier. The Death Corps of Krieg, one of the only cultures allowed to make hybrid regiments, is composed of World War I-looking trench warfare and chemical weapons specialists. Following an even more extreme version of the Imperial cult based around personal sacrifice to the Emperor, they will walk in lockstep line formation, bayonets forward with complete disregard for their own lives. Meanwhile, the Praetorian Guard seems to be more invested in looking like classic Imperial British soldiers, wearing formal Victorian-style military outfits and fighting with extreme class and grace, never retreating, only tactically advancing to the rear, etc. As you can see, just saying Imperial Guard is not necessarily sufficient for the infantry of the 40k universe. There are many types, from drop troopers with shoulder-mounted jump packs to jungle fighters born and raised in a world where everything is trying to eat you, especially the plants. Suitably, every major named regiment has a different style and preferred combat scenario, and the Imperium will choose accordingly depending on the threat they think is present.
Which makes them very versatile, and given the combined arms they have, they are able to wage war effectively at multiple ranges with armored support.
This doctrine also applies to the Navy at large. Every individual captain of his or her ship can do whatever they need to in the moment. Furthermore, ship groups can easily coordinate with each other in the moment via the Voxcaster and make new tactics as needed. As each ship tends to have a subtly different layout and weaponry, this makes the Imperial Navy a similarly flexible force as the Imperial Guard. And, of course, none of this even begins to cover the glory of the Imperial Titans and the Night Houses. While it would be awesome to go on about what amounts to the Imperium of Man's mechs, suffice to say it's mostly more of the same. Just big, fat, super fucked up robots with what amount to spaceship weapons and void shields that can take over entire planets by themselves and are regarded by most in the Imperium as machine gods of war. There's a lot to say about them, but like much of the Assassinorum, nothing that we could say is terribly germane to the scope of this scenario, so we're just gonna move on.
There are very few things in this world that scare me, but one of them is extremist organized religions, like the Puritans, the NIFB, or the Ori, because you aren't dealing with reasonable people anymore. You're dealing with people who would burn someone alive if they could get away with it, often for no other reason than they just don't believe hard enough. The Imperium of Man is like that. The Emperor of Man is regarded as a god, and at nearly 4 times the size of your average human, he'd be a sight to see. For context, I'm 5'8", 5'9" on a good day.
You can basically fit 4 Imperial Guardsmen pictures into one Emperor picture in that size chart, you know, 1 in each leg and 1 on each side of his torso. Probably still have quite a bit of Emperor meat to go around there. Might be able to chop up a 5th guy and sort of paste him in there. Guy's an absolute fucking unit. We're 6.5 feet tall on a good day, and the Emperor is easily over twice our height alone, and probably 9 times our mass.
The Emperor is no longer this imposing giant of a man, though. He has been largely incapacitated by his son Horus, and kept alive by technology, issuing orders from his throne/life support system for over 10,000 years on humanity's homeworld, now called Holy Terra. This religious zealotry is realistically not a good thing. Sure, it keeps people fighting for a cause, but this kind of extremism keeps them from adapting to other tech or ideas. They can't even consider them because to do so is straight up heresy. This means that the Imperium has stagnated with very little forward progress in tech or tactics. They've actually lost technology, like all knowledge, period, of some equipment that they can't replicate, repair, or use. Some of that tech consists of super weapons. No matter what, the Imperium as a whole will not utilize or research any new tech, even if it's shown to be superior to what they already have. I guess the God Emperor didn't read The Art of War.
See, that is where you are wrong, but it is easy to think that given the state of the inquisitorial propaganda. Good rogue traders like ourselves know that the Emperor in his day wanted the galaxy to be an anti-theistic one, not just a secular one, but one that specifically rejected gods and religion, embraced technology, scientific progress, and sought to eliminate all worship, probably to destroy the Chaos Gods or something. Since his plugging into the throne, however, the Inquisition and Ecclesiarchy have literally made a religion out of him called the Imperial Cult. Next to it is the Cult Mechanicus, centered on Mars. The Cult Mechanicus worships the Omnissiah, but we're not going to get into that here. It could get its own video. Long story short, the Cult Mechanicus holds by and large that all technology that can be made already is made and present in the universe. They send out huge explorator fleets, basically just forge worlds in their own right floating through the void, to find this lost technology, and from there either deem it heretical or try to keep it for themselves. Maybe they'll feed it slowly to parts of the Imperium, but they're very secretive. They literally have tech priests and machine spirits, so suffice to say, it's just as religious as it is technological, and is almost certainly more religious than it is scientific. By definition, this sort of there's nothing new under the sun mentality keeps innovation from occurring in the Imperium, because they believe that there's nothing new to make. It's all already out there, you just gotta go find it and figure out if it's kosher or not. Any assertions to the contrary are heretical.
I gotta ask, does the Emperor actually lead his empire, or is he just a figurehead now?
Full disclosure, nobody actually knows. Allegedly, he sends psychic messages to his chosen, but realistically speaking, the Imperium of Man is a long, bloated, and corrupt institution that has not received any messages from the Emperor since, probably the Reign of Blood, and even that's potentially questionable. It's readily apparent in the Emperor's Legion that the Emperor does put off powerful light and psychic energy, but there's no telling if that's actually him, or if the husk of what remains of his body is just the foundation for a bonfire of souls that the Imperium has kept going for the last 10,000 years. Inquisitors on all sides disagree. A very true and proper religion if you ever did see one.
So, no real leadership from him. Got it.
Yeah, no. Oh, important. We almost forgot. So because of the culture of the Imperium, a lot of people get mind wiped. A lot. We mean, mind wiping is super normal and super mandatory in most big and important combat jobs throughout the Imperium. And hypno-indoctrination. You become a space marine, with exception your mind gets completely wiped and you completely forget your past life. Then you're indoctrinated with training, conditioning, brainwashing, propaganda, all that good stuff. Some forces so often interact with dangerous information that they are mind wiped and reprogrammed after every single mission. While normally this wouldn't be very important, it's noteworthy in this scenario to remember that many such individuals cannot be tortured or brain hacked for information. The information just isn't there. These hyper-elite soldiers won't even know who they're working for, let alone the inner workings and purpose of why they're doing it, and the Imperium is so large that it doesn't even help to ask. Even if you had some crazy technology that subsumes someone's conscious thoughts into an all-knowing hive mind, for example, it wouldn't give that hive mind anything special on a cultural or tactical level, with exception to the tactics indoctrinated into the soldier for that specific mission. Any cultural or other information beyond that would be, at best, too propagandistic to glean proper information from. One of the greatest weapons the Imperium has to offer is Exterminatus. If the time calls for it and there are no other options, if the ruinous powers have gotten their hands on a world and the cult cannot be wiped out but instead spreads across the planet, if there's something on the planet that the Imperium simply cannot allow to live, they simply wipe it out entirely. Exterminatus is one of what seems about a dozen different ways to completely depopulate a planet and render it unlivable. While most Exterminatus orders are simply carried out with good old-fashioned mass orbital bombardment, there are more than a few methods that will wipe out an entire planet's surface with a single shot.
Scorched Earth is the best Earth. If you want to deny your enemy a strategic position or resources, the best way to do it is to remove it entirely from play, if you're willing to sacrifice access to it for yourself as well. Obviously, this is a worst-case scenario and should by no means be used in anything other than a last option or last stand scenario.
The Necrons mainly have this kind of weapon in spades, but the Imperium's also got their hands on what's called phase weapons. These weapons, normally melee weapons, phase through just about anything and cut through you on a trans-dimensional level. Nothing in canon seems to work against them. Shields, armor, thick hide, psychic barriers, demonic anatomy, they just fuck you up. No ifs, ands, or buts. If these things cut you, you'll wish you hadn't been cut. The only exception that we know of is, at one point, a best assassin trying to kill a planetary governor with a Catan phase blade, and he was a Catan in hiding. His anatomy ate the phase blade, as it was made of the same stuff he was, and then the assassin met her untimely end.
That will be difficult to respond to in any real case. If it ignores anything but people whose specific biology can counter it, such a weapon would be more than devastating on the field until you run into that numbers problem that overwhelms the user. It always comes down to a numbers game. A coordinated wave can take it out, but with the understanding that they will lose people in the process.
In 40k, the soul is real. It's not some generic woobly construct. It's a real, measurable thing. Certain people with the right mutations can see it. And 1,000 of them, now 10,000 we believe, are fed to the Emperor every single day just to power his chair. There are people without souls, like the Psychic Nulls, and there are species who have much more powerful and potent souls, like the Eldar. The Imperium, aka the Warp, is a dimension of souls. It is shaped by them, and within the Warp, certain entities can sense and hunger for those souls. So soul-damaging weaponry is probably pretty fucked. It cuts past your physical body and destroys everything that you possibly could be. You're not just dead, you're obliterated. Your body is just an empty shell incapable of managing its own functions.
That is brutal. Soul-crushingly brutal.
Yeah, we aren't sure we know many settings that are inherently able to defend against something like that, assuming the standard definitions of the 40k universe still apply. Pretty fucking hardcore, not gonna lie. Psykers are individuals shaped by the warp, able to freely access it and use the power of chaos to create cool effects like telekinesis, force lightning, precognition, mind reading, all the fun Oculus shit you would otherwise think about. The Imperium has no shortage of individuals that can blow out your brains with their brains, and a very rare few weapons can do the same thing, like the Calidus Temple's neural shredders. These short-range psychic firearms shoot psionic energy instead of bullets or radiation, which free-fires all of your neurons and literally melts your brain from the inside out so it slooshes out your nose.
Since there's no real-world analog for psychic powers, since it doesn't exist, we're left with what's in the lore. It looks like using such abilities is pretty taxing. It's not surprising since the literal laws of physics would be fighting you the whole way. These troops can lay the hate down pretty hard, but not for long. Hell, even their weapons and abilities have a chance of bringing some dangerous side effects to the table. It can go from as innocuous as a nosebleed to exploding heads and demons crawling out of a Terran reality to eat whatever gets too close. I personally consider this a bad day for everyone in the immediate vicinity of that whole shit show.
You'd certainly be right about that. While demons can indeed be sent back from whence they came by shooting them enough, as taking damage robs them of the energy they use to stay corporeal outside of the warp, they will still absolutely tear your god's damned arms off and then fist you with them. Quote, taking damage, unquote, doesn't mean the same thing to them as it means to you, and some of the bigger demons will still take a bolter round to the teeth and promptly tell you they'd only spend $9.50 for that in a restaurant setting before settling on you for dessert.
Overall, the Imperium of Man is well-rounded from a military standpoint as it pertains to assets. Tactically and technologically, they are stagnant, and their communication on intergalactic scales is an absolute shit show. Not to mention the sheer bureaucracy. Frankly, I'm surprised they've survived as long as they have, but I'll just chalk that up to religious zealotry and outright defiance. Yeah, I said it. Send the Inquisitors.
Nah, you're almost certainly right on that. In a sense, they are an extremely stable system in that any deviance from the norm ends in forceful brainwashing, penal legion conscription, getting transformed into a mindless cyborg servant, or just getting killed. A sort of selective pressure exists in the Imperium for the last 10,000 years to completely cull all disloyalty and any desire to turn away from the Imperial cult. While plenty of people do find a way to embrace heresy and hear the temptation of the ruinous powers, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the death grip that the iron hand of the ecclesiarchy has on the people, and most people who turn to chaos are simply tricked into believing they're serving the Emperor until it's too late. This is, after all, a universe where believing in the wrong god does have consequences, like becoming a body horror monstrosity obsessed with drinking blood and spreading crotch rot. So, the zealotry has served them well. It's a hard, violent, barbaric life they live, but it's one where they do live. We won't say, like so many, that humanity wouldn't be able to survive in this grimdark universe if they stopped this way of life. During the Great Crusade, they clearly lived out a much more atheistic culture that was absolutely crushing it. So there are ways, but this works for them in the 42nd millennium. It's worked for a long time, and the Imperium is like to stick with things that just work. And being a violently zealous interstellar theocracy sacrificing thousands a day to support the undying husk of an emperor on a big golden chair so as to light up the universe as a literal beacon to navigate by, well, it's tried and true. It just works.
Ah, the immortal words of Todd Howard. I think that covers the Imperium of Man and what they bring to the table for combat. Next time, we're going to look at a foe like none they've ever faced. The cold, calculating, emotionless society of cyborgs that exert the most dominance in the Delta Quadrant. The Imperium of Man will face the hive mind of the Borg Collective. See you then.